The caste system transformed Indian genetics. David Reich.
How is it possible that for 4,000 years, the things like caste, things like basic mythology can be preserved with such high fidelity, especially in an era, for at least a couple thousand or 2,000 years, you don't even have writing?
Well, you're asking me a cultural question, not a genetic one. So what you see in the genetic data from South Asia is an amazing process. So today in South Asia, almost everybody is on a gradient of ancestry with two poles, what we call the ancestry.
Hey, I saw this gradient. Yeah, I saw it in the general chat. I was looking at it, it's like, oh my gosh. Yeah, absolutely interesting how everything is so high percentage, because I'm white, so it's completely muddled down. I have no clue. Eventually, I will get a DNA test to find out exactly how white I am. But yeah.
Ancestral North Indians and the ancestral South Indians, with very few exceptions. The exceptions are people with your last name, Patel.
Oh, yeah?
And as a minor exception, but it's interesting that that's your last name. But also people with from Munda, like who speak Austroasiatic languages or are admixed with them, or people who are Tibeto-Burman speakers. But most people are on a mixture between two poles, ancestral North Indians and ancestral South Indians. And when you look at genetic data from India, it looks like what you see today in African Americans, with people with relatively higher or lower proportions of, say, European and West African ancestry. And so it looks like a population in the process of mixture, like African Americans, who are the result of mixture in the last 10 or so generations between mostly two very different populations mixing in different proportions. But what happened in India is it froze. So the mixing started and then it froze. And the freezing happened 2,000 to 3,000 years ago, and it froze because of cultural change. So what happens in India is you have a three-part change. You have a arrival of three source populations, essentially parallel to what you see in Europe. There's a local hunter-gatherer population. There's what's probably a farming population, maybe also a hunter-gatherer population initially. And then there are these people descended at some level from steppe pastoralists. These are the three primary ancestral populations. They come together at the end of the decline of the Harappan civilization, which ends about 3,800 years ago. And groups from this Harappan group, which we actually have sampled, and they're all on a different gradient, they mix with the steppe groups and with the local hunter-gatherer groups to form and coalesce to these two later groups, which we call the ancestral North Indians and ancestral South Indians. And then mixtures of these two mixed populations form in the Gangetic plain, form people all along this gradient. And it's really a very simple mixture of two sources. And then the cultural change happens, which locks in the caste system, and people freeze and they stop mixing very much. And so what you see is, instead of people collapsing to a point, which is what you see in Europe after this type of mixing process of these three sources happen in any one region, you see this gradient forming and it's stable. And because of the enduringness of the caste system, you actually have a snapshot going back a couple of thousand years, and without this continuing change. And so it's kind of an amazing.
Yeah, that's the fascinating thing, like the positive of like the caste system. Like, it's funny. I've always had people argue with how the caste system was institutionalized by like Britain. I'm pretty sure they weaponized it, but I doubt it was well, it definitely wasn't institutionalized by them. Propaganda. Especially when you have like DNA markers, which you can't find anywhere else in the world, because intermixing has always been like the forefront, like the end goal. Nobody really cared about someone's caste. It was just about who they are as a person. That's at least how I've always seen it. Sure, a lot of people do care about like how someone looks. People do have biases. Like, I would never get with a Hispanic woman or a white woman, because white women are crazy, and I could be related to a Hispanic woman for all I know. So it was just, for me, it's just like, no. I had my biases as well. But yeah, I mean, in the end, it's just like, there is proof that it had been there forever. And there's nothing wrong with admitting the fact that it was there. I mean, it's what gives us such a high sample size for doing a genealogy test and finding out exactly the history and movement of populations throughout the year. Because all we have now to know exactly how people migrated and moved is using DNA as markers to find out, oh, how did you get this? How did you get this? How did you get this? When did it get there? And with most people, it's so muddled that you can't really have a good roadmap as to how things happened.
System genetically to look at, because of people's reluctance to mix with people from very different groups in traditional communities. So the three steps are coming together of very different populations, and then convulsive, profound mixing of groups that had previously not mixed, and then locking into this static system as the caste system sets in, which is documented in the early texts like the Rig Veda. And you can actually see the change in that discussion during the course of the Rig Veda.
I know you warned about being too interested in yourself, but what was it about the Patels? Why are they an exception?
So the first good genomic data from South Asians is embarrassingly from Houston, Texas. So in the Human Haplotype Map Project, there was a sample from Houston, Texas of Gujaratis in Houston, Texas.
A lot of Patels in Houston.
GIH. And if you look at them, people are actually not on this gradient, but they're in a few different places. They're clustered into groups. And there's the main gradient and there's an off gradient group. And I forgot how we figured this out, but someone figured out that these people are all Patels. And Patels have their own distinctive history with different relationships to people in Central Asia. And it's probably some additional ancestry from Central Asia pushing them off the main gradient.
Interesting.
Yeah, that was interesting. Sure. Call it propaganda if you wish, but that was actually pretty fascinating, especially using like DNA as a marker to find where people are in the world, how we all got here in the world. All that stuff has always been fascinating. I mean, again, like I don't know much about geopolitics, but it's always fascinating to see how the world has intermixed, how it's grown, how it's changed, because we are a different people than when we first started. It completely different people. India had a Varna system, not caste system. I don't know what the Varna system is, but if it does change how people mix and marry out of culture, then yeah, it is different. Intermixing in India is considered bad. Arranged marriage still common. Yeah, I know arranged marriage is still common. Common in its totality, but things are changing rapidly because of globalization. Yeah, the fact that social media is both a blessing and a curse. Because yeah, that's the thing. It's just like again, I always get mad at my wife when she says love marriage or arranged marriage. But it's funny because me, when I think about it, it's just like an arranged marriage probably has a longer life expectancy than a love marriage, because one of them you go into with emotion and lust, the other one you go into as a business transaction. One of those is most likely going to last longer than the other, because it just, you've always got to work on relationships.
You guys got a video? So bad.
Don't forget to like and subscribe.
Wait on that.